The Russian sleep experiment is one of the most infamous horror stories circulating on the internet, often mistaken for a real historical event. It describes a fictional Soviet-era experiment in which 5 political prisoners were subjected to an experimental gas that prevented them from sleeping for 15 days. The experiment, allegedly conducted in the 1940s, took place in a secret Soviet research facility, where the subjects were promised freedom if they successfully completed the test. They were placed in a sealed chamber, equipped with microphones, one-way mirrors, and oxygen sensors ensuring constant surveillance. The chamber contained books, cots but no bedding, running water, and enough dried food to last for a month. The researchers introduced a stimulant gas designed to keep the subjects awake, believing that prolonged wakefulness would provide insights into human endurance and psychological resilience. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. The prisoners engaged in conversations, followed their routines, and showed no signs of distress. However, as the days passed, their behavior began to change in disturbing ways. By day 5, the subjects started displaying paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began whispering to the microphones, seemingly convinced that they could win the trust of the researchers by betraying their fellow prisoners. Their speech became erratic, their thoughts fragmented, and their interactions increasingly hostile. By day 9, the first subject began screaming uncontrollably, running around the chamber in a frenzy, yelling for hours until his voice became raw and hoarse. The other prisoners did not react. They continued whispering to the microphones as if engaged in secret conversations with unseen entities. Soon, another subject began screaming, his cries merging with the eerie silence of the others. The remaining prisoners tore pages from books, smeared them with their own feces, and pasted them over the glass portholes, preventing the researchers from seeing inside. Then, silence. The chamber remained eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustling of movement. The researchers, puzzled and increasingly concerned, debated whether to intervene. By day 15, the researchers decided to terminate the experiment. They turned off the gas and announced via intercom that the test was over. What they heard next was chilling. A single voice whispered, "Some prisoner, we no longer want to be freed." When the researchers opened the chamber, they were met with a horrific sight. The floor was covered in blood, yet there were no visible wounds on most of the subjects. Large chunks of skin and flesh were missing, not from attacks, but from self-inflicted mutilation. One subject had gouged out his own eyes and stuffed them into his mouth, his face contorted in a grotesque grin. Another had ripped open his own abdomen, pulling out his intestines, yet continued to move as if he felt no pain. Their bodies were emaciated, their muscles twitching unnaturally, their eyes wide with an unsettling, vacant stare. The surviving subjects refused to leave the chamber. They begged to be kept inside and exposed to the gas, their voices desperate and pleading. When the researchers attempted to sedate them, they displayed inhuman strength, resisting with a force far beyond normal human capability. One prisoner killed a soldier who tried to remove him, his movements swift and calculated, as if driven by an unnatural force. As the experiment spiraled out of control, the researchers demanded answers. They asked the last surviving subject why they had mutilated themselves and why they refused to sleep. The prisoner smiled, a chilling, knowing expression, and whispered, "Some prisoner, we are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be freed at every moment in your deepest animal mind." The story ends in bloodshed, with the researchers attempting to contain the situation, but ultimately failing. The experiment, once a scientific endeavor, had become a nightmare beyond comprehension. Despite its terrifying nature, the Russian sleep experiment is purely fictional. It originated as a creepypasta, a horror-themed urban legend spread online. The story gained immense popularity, with many believing it to be real. It has been adapted into novels, plays, and films, including the Soviet sleep experiment in 2018 and the sleep experiment in 2019. The tale resonates with audiences because it plays on fears of unethical human experimentation, similar to real historical events. While the Soviet Union conducted controversial psychological experiments, there is no evidence that the Russian sleep experiment ever took place. However, its haunting premise continues to captivate audiences, fueling discussions about the limits of human endurance, the effects of sleep deprivation, and the ethical boundaries of scientific research. Thanks for watching. Now subscribe.